So, Missouri X-Rail Gaines v. Canada. So Gaines, in this case, is an African American applicant to the University of Missouri Law School. Um, his application is denied solely on the basis of race. There's no smoke and mirrors. He is denied admission to the University of Missouri Law School because he's African American. But because of the separate but equal laws that existed, what this would generally have meant was he would have to be admitted to another law school in the state. The state would have to provide him separate but equal accommodations. Well, the state of Missouri didn't have an African American law school. So what they did instead was provided him with tuition and other monetary incentives to go to an out-of-state law school that would admit African Americans. Did all of this instead of simply establishing an African American law school. So Gaines brings suit with the backing of the NAACP, charging that it's a violation of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. He claims that being paid to the issue in the case is whether being sent to an out-of-state school meets the separate but equal qualifications under Plessy. So this isn't even challenging Plessy. It's just pushing the state to say, you have to create an African American law school. You can't simply ship African Americans elsewhere if you aren't willing to provide separate and equal accommodations. The Supreme Court is very clear in this decision. They say that Missouri is obligated to provide Gaines within its borders facilities for legal education substantially equal to those of which were offered to persons of the white race, whether or not any other African Americans sought the same opportunity. If it was just Gaines, they still had to do it. In the absence of such facility, the state law the state could not pay African Americans to attend law school out of state, as that's a violation of equal protection. So the state has two choices. One, create an African American law school, even if it just applies to Gaines, or admit him to the University of Missouri Law School. Because what they did, in essence, according to the court, was create a privilege for white students that was absolutely denied to African American students. That it simply, you can't prohibit it and ship it away. Like it is a profound level of racism to pay out of pocket to send an individual across state bounds to go to another law school, pay for their tuition, pay for their travel expenses, pay for their relocation, as opposed to just admitting them to the law school exists. From all accounts, there weren't a lot of African Americans in 1938 that were seeking to go to law school in the state of Missouri. It's not like there was a run of a number of African Americans who were seeking to do this. There really was one. It was Gaines. And so ultimately, after the Supreme Court makes this decision, as opposed to creating an African American law school, Missouri chooses simply to admit Gaines into the University of Missouri Law School. Now, this doesn't chip away against the separate but equal doctrine. It doesn't do anything to Plessy. Plessy still stands as good law. But what it does do is it puts confines on how far that concept of separate but equal can be stretched. The state segregated their law school, but did not actually create a separate law school for African Americans. So it simply denied as opposed to segregate. And denying something on the basis of race is always going to be bad law. And the Supreme Court has been steady in that precedent. Think of Strouder in this regard. Strouder says African Americans can't be members of the jury. Despite the language that's in that opinion, that's a very clear interpretation of the 14th Amendment that says that no, if you provide something to one group of people on the basis of race, you can't deny it to another group on the basis of race. Well, in this case, African Americans were denied access to law school in the state of Missouri. And so the Missouri has to comply either by providing separate accommodations or by admitting them to the University of Missouri Law School, which is what was ultimately done in this case. This is one of the first cases that the NAACP sort of takes on as a means of getting to their ultimate goal. And their ultimate goal should be obvious. Their ultimate goal is to end separate but equal laws. But they take this case, which is in essence mandating that the state actually enforce separate but equal laws. That if you are going to make it separate but equal, you have to provide us with accommodation or just give us access. And in this case, the ultimate outcome is that Gaines gets access and is admitted to the University of Missouri Law School.